Leopoldov Prison is where I have been buried alive. My name is Marek Holub, and I am serving a life sentence in Slovakia's most notorious prison. It was once a fortress, built centuries ago to withstand armies. Now, it holds men like me, men the world has given up on. But I refuse to accept that this is where my story ends. I wasn't always a prisoner. Once, I was a free man, running the streets of Bratislava with nothing but ambition and desperation. I grew up in the gray concrete blocks of Petržalka, a place where dreams wither before they can take root. My father was a drunk, my mother long gone. The streets raised me, and I learned early that power belonged to those who took it. By the time I was 20, I was knee-deep in crime. Smuggling, robbery, protection rackets. I did it all. But it was the bank job that sealed my fate. It was supposed to be simple. A quick in and out, no unnecessary violence. We had planned it for weeks, studied the security, mapped every escape route. The day of the heist, everything went smoothly until it didn't. A silent alarm, a fast response. The police were on us before we could even reach the getaway car. In the chaos, shots were fired. I still don't know who pulled the trigger first, but when the smoke cleared, a security guard lay dying on the floor. That was the moment everything changed. We ran, scattering like rats, but I was the one they caught. And with a dead guard on the scene, there was no mercy in my sentencing. Life without parole. At first, I raged against it. I fought, rebelled, spent months in solitary for my defiance. But over time, something shifted. I stopped wasting energy on anger and started thinking. Watching. Waiting. Leopoldov was designed to keep men like me inside forever. But no prison is perfect. I have spent years studying its weaknesses, searching for cracks in the system. And I have found them. They say no one escapes from Leopoldov. That no one ever will. They're wrong. Every prison has a rhythm. The guards, the inmates, the daily routines, it all becomes predictable if you pay attention. And I have been paying attention for years. The first step in any escape is information. I needed to know everything. Which guards were lazy? Who could be bribed? What doors were unlocked at certain hours? The more I watched, the more I learned. The guards rotated in shifts of 8 hours, always the same men at the same times. The night shift, I noticed, was the weakest. Half asleep, careless, and relying too much on the cameras to do their jobs for them. But cameras don't stop a man determined to escape. The prison had one major flaw, an old sewage system that ran beneath the East Wing. It had been sealed off decades ago, but I knew from talking to older inmates that parts of it still existed. The trick was finding a way in. There was only one entrance, and it was inside the restricted maintenance room. To get there, I had to pass through 2 locked doors, 1 guarded station, and a hallway with a single camera. For weeks, I tested the waters. I started small, causing distractions in the yard, watching how the guards reacted, noting which ones were slow to respond. I got into a fight once, just to see how long it took for the guards to break it up. 45 seconds. Too fast. I needed at least 2 minutes to move undetected. Then there was the issue of supplies. I needed tools, something to pry open the maintenance hatch, something to cut through old metal bars if necessary. A smuggler in Block C owed me a favor, and he had a way of getting things inside. I sent word. I needed a metal file, a small flashlight, and gloves. It would take time, but I had patience. The night I made my first real move, the rain was pounding against the walls, drowning out the usual sounds of the prison. I faked an illness, groaning in pain, drawing the attention of the night guard. He hesitated before unlocking my cell to check on me. That was his mistake. I moved fast, striking his throat with just enough force to stun him, then locking my arm around his neck. A few seconds later, he was unconscious. I grabbed his keys and slipped into the corridor. This was it, the first real step toward freedom. But I wasn't out yet. I had to reach the maintenance room, and every second I lingered outside my cell increased my chances of getting caught. I moved fast, keeping to the shadows, my heart pounding with every step. Just as I reached the locked door leading to the restricted section, I heard footsteps. A guard was coming. I pressed myself against the cold wall, barely breathing. If he turned this way, if he saw the unconscious man in my cell, the alarm would sound, and it would all be over. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, by some stroke of luck, the guard kept walking. I exhaled slowly and pushed forward. The key turned in the lock, and the door creaked open. Beyond it, the entrance to the old maintenance tunnels waited in darkness. I took one last look at the prison behind me. Then I stepped inside. Part 3. The Depths of Darkness. The air in the tunnel was thick with the stench of rot and stagnant water. My flashlight flickered to life, revealing walls slick with condensation and rusted pipes that groaned under their own weight. The moment I stepped into the tunnel, the air changed. It was damp, heavy with the stench of rust and rot. My flashlight cut through the pitch black, revealing cracked stone walls slick with moisture. The tunnel stretched into the unknown, a winding path that I had only theorized about. I had no map, no guarantees, only the knowledge that this was my best shot at freedom. I moved cautiously, my boots splashing through shallow puddles. The tunnel sloped downward, and the sound of trickling water echoed around me. Rats scurried along the walls, their claws scratching against the stone. Every noise felt deafening in the stillness. Above me, somewhere far away, the prison still slept. But I knew it wouldn't last. By now, the guards would be checking cells. It wouldn't take long for them to find the unconscious man in my bunk and raise the alarm. I had to keep moving. The tunnel twisted sharply, and for a moment, panic set in. I had lost all sense of direction. Was I heading toward the outside world or deeper into a maze of forgotten passageways? The old prisoners' stories had been vague, filled with half-truths and rumors. Some had claimed this tunnel connected to an abandoned sewage line, leading to a forgotten service hatch outside the walls. Others had warned it was a dead end, a relic of a previous century, sealed off and useless. I wouldn't know which version was true until I reached the end. The walls narrowed, forcing me to duck as I pressed forward. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, the weight of the prison still looming above me. I had spent years dreaming about this moment, but now that I was here, reality set in. One wrong turn, one mistake, and I'd die down here. I kept going, following the faintest hint of airflow. The tunnel had to lead somewhere. I stepped over broken bricks, my fingers brushing against rusted pipes for balance. Then I saw it, a metal grate embedded in the floor, its bars corroded with age. I crouched beside it, testing its strength. It was rusted but still solid. I retrieved the metal file I had smuggled in and began sawing at the bolts. Then I heard it, distant, but unmistakable. Footsteps. They were faint, echoing from somewhere far behind me. But they were getting closer. The guards had found the entrance to the tunnel. I worked faster, my hands slick with sweat as I forced the file against the stubborn metal. The bolt groaned but didn't give. My heart pounded. If they had dogs, I was done for. I gritted my teeth, attacking the rust with renewed force. The bolt snapped with a sharp crack. I pulled the grate free, lowering it to the ground as quietly as I could. A dark shaft stretched below me. No ladder. No rope. Just a drop into the unknown. There was no time to hesitate. I swung my legs over the edge and let go. The fall wasn't far, but I hit the ground hard, pain jolting through my legs. I bit down a curse and forced myself up. This tunnel was different, wider, the air heavier with the stench of decay. My flashlight flickered, the battery struggling. I had to move fast. I ran, the tunnel walls closing in around me. My mind raced through possibilities. If this led nowhere, I'd have to double back, face the guards head on. I could take down one, maybe two, but more than that? Impossible. Up ahead, the tunnel split into two paths. I hesitated for only a second before choosing the one with a stronger breeze. Airflow meant an opening. Freedom. I sprinted, my breath ragged. Behind me, the shouts of guards echoed down the tunnels. They were close. Too close. Then, I saw it. A rusted service hatch, half buried in debris. I lunged for it, shoving aside broken bricks and scraping my hands raw as I searched for the latch. My fingers found metal. I yanked, but it didn't budge. No. Not now. Not when I was this close. I threw my weight against it, muscles screaming. The hinges groaned, resisting years of neglect. Footsteps pounded behind me. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. A voice shouted, then a gunshot rang out. The bullet ricocheted off the wall inches from my head. I ducked instinctively, my heart slamming against my ribs. The guards weren't warning me anymore. They were aiming to kill. Desperation took over. I kicked the hatch, once, twice, and then it gave way. Cold night air rushed in as I scrambled through the opening, tumbling onto wet grass. I was outside, but I wasn't free yet. Ahead of me, stretching beyond the prison perimeter, was open land. No cover, no shelter. Just a vast expanse leading to a dense tree line in the distance. If I ran now, they'd see me. If I hesitated, they'd catch me. I had seconds to decide. The barking of dogs erupted behind me. I ran. The wet grass beneath my feet did little to cushion my steps, and every movement sent jolts of pain through my legs. My lungs burned, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when freedom was within reach. Behind me, the barking of the dogs grew louder. The guards were close, too close. I could hear their shouts, their boots pounding against the ground as they spread out in pursuit. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, sweeping across the open land, searching for any sign of movement. If they spotted me before I reached the tree line, it was over. I lowered myself, running hunched over, hoping to use the uneven terrain to my advantage. The field was dotted with patches of tall grass, shallow dips in the earth, small obstacles that slowed me down but also gave me cover. I zigzagged, trying to throw off their aim in case they decided to fire again. A gunshot rang out. I flinched as a bullet tore through the air somewhere behind me. They weren't just trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to end this. The tree line was closer now, maybe 50 meters away. My legs screamed in protest, but I forced myself forward. I couldn't afford to collapse, not when I was this close. The howls of the dogs were deafening, their handlers shouting commands. If they released them now, I'd never make it. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of leashes being unclipped. The dogs were loose. Panic surged through me, but I didn't look back. Looking back meant slowing down, and slowing down meant getting caught. Instead, I pushed forward, digging my heels into the mud, launching myself toward the tree line with everything I had left. The moment I crossed into the dense forest, everything changed. The thick canopy above swallowed the moonlight, plunging the world into darkness. The uneven ground was a tangle of roots and fallen branches, making every step treacherous. But it also worked in my favor. The guards wouldn't be able to see me as easily, and their flashlights wouldn't penetrate far. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. Branches clawed at my face and arms as I tore through the undergrowth. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body screaming for rest, but I forced myself onward. The dogs were gaining. I could hear them crashing through the brush behind me, their snarls growing closer with every second. I needed a plan. Running blindly through the forest would only buy me so much time. The guards had radios, organization, numbers. I had nothing but my instincts and whatever luck was left on my side. If I wanted to survive, I had to lose them. Fast. Up ahead, the terrain dipped sharply downward into a ravine. Water glistened at the bottom, a narrow, fast-moving stream. It wasn't deep, but it was enough. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself down the slope, letting gravity take over. My body crashed through leaves and rocks, pain flaring in my arms and ribs as I tumbled. At the last second, I twisted, landing feet first in the icy water. The shock nearly knocked the breath from my lungs, but I forced myself to stay submerged. The current pulled at me, and I let it, drifting downstream as quietly as I could. Above me, the dogs reached the edge of the ravine. Their barking turned frantic, confused. They had lost my scent. The rushing water had masked it. I didn't have much time. I let the current carry me for as long as I dared, my limbs numb from the cold. When I was certain I had put enough distance between myself and the guards, I crawled onto the bank, dragging my exhausted body onto solid ground. I had escaped Leopoldov, but I wasn't free yet. The forest stretched endlessly before me, a labyrinth of trees and shadows. My soaked clothes clung to my body, making every step feel heavier. My mind screamed for rest, but I couldn't stop. The prison would already be coordinating a manhunt. Roadblocks, patrols, maybe even helicopters if they thought I was worth the effort. I needed to disappear. I moved through the forest, sticking to the shadows, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. Every sound, every rustling leaf, every distant hoot of an owl felt like a potential threat. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by an exhaustion so deep it threatened to pull me under. Then I saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. A cabin. It was small, barely more than a shack, nestled between the trees like it had been forgotten by time. No signs of movement, no sound. Just a faint glow from inside. I approached carefully, my body tense, ready to run if needed. The door was slightly ajar. Someone had been here recently. I peered inside. Empty. Whoever owned the place wasn't home. The cabin was sparse, an old wood stove, a rickety table, a cot in the corner. A hunting rifle rested against the wall, alongside a worn-out jacket. Supplies. Warmth. Safety, even if just for a moment. I closed the door behind me and collapsed onto the cot, my body screaming in relief. My mind raced with what came next. I was out of prison, but the world outside was just as dangerous. I needed food, new clothes, a way to travel without being recognized. I needed a plan. But first, I needed sleep. As my eyes shut, one thought lingered in my mind. They would never stop looking for me. I woke to the first light of dawn creeping through the cracks in the wooden cabin walls. My body ached, every muscle stiff from the night before. My clothes were still damp, clinging to my skin, and despite the warmth of the cabin, a deep chill settled in my bones. My mind screamed at me to move, but exhaustion had weighed me down, keeping me trapped in a haze of fatigue. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I was safe. The dogs had lost my trail, the guards were scouring the forest in the wrong direction, and I had found shelter, however temporary it might be. But then the reality of my situation hit me. I was a fugitive. Even now, patrols were out there, searching. Roadblocks were being set up. My face would be on every news station, plastered on every police bulletin. I had gotten out, but I wasn't free. I needed to move. I sat up slowly, groaning at the soreness in my ribs. The fall into the ravine had left bruises, and my legs throbbed from the relentless running. My boots, caked in mud, had held up, but they wouldn't last forever. Neither would I, not without food or a plan. I scanned the cabin. It was small, likely a hunting lodge, abandoned for the season. The rifle leaning against the wall tempted me, but I knew better. Carrying a gun would only make things worse if I got caught. Instead, I rummaged through the drawers, finding a small stash of supplies, dried meat, a loaf of stale bread, a water flask. Not much, but enough to keep me going. Then I found something more useful, a map. It was old, the edges frayed, but it showed the surrounding forest and the nearest towns. I traced my finger over the roads, searching for the best route out. Leopoldov was to the southwest, which meant I needed to head north, deeper into the wilderness, away from the main roads. But I couldn't stay in the forest forever. Sooner or later, I need to find civilization. I needed to steal a vehicle. The small town of Smolensk was about 20 kilometers away. If I could reach it, I might find a car to steal or a train to hop. But that meant walking through dense forest for hours, possibly running into search teams. Every minute wasted put me at greater risk. I packed the supplies into a small satchel I found in the cabin, threw on the worn-out jacket from the cot, and stepped outside. The forest was eerily quiet. Birds flitted between branches, and the occasional rustle of leaves reminded me I wasn't the only one moving through the woods. I kept my head low and started walking. The hours stretched long. My stomach ached for real food, and my body begged for rest, but I pushed forward. Every noise sent my heart hammering. A distant helicopter passed overhead once, and I threw myself into the underbrush, pressing my face against the damp earth until it was gone. By midday, I reached the outskirts of Smolensk. The town was small, quaint even. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the streets were quiet. Only a few people moving about. I stayed on the edge, watching from the tree line. Walking in like this, mud-streaked, ragged, exhausted, would get me noticed. I needed to be careful. Then I saw it. A gas station with an old truck parked out front. A man in overalls was fueling it up, his back turned. The keys dangled in the ignition. It was a risk, but I didn't have a choice. I moved fast, crossing the street before anyone could notice. As soon as the man stepped inside the station to pay, I yanked open the driver's door and slid in. My fingers trembled as I turned the key. The engine roared to life. Shouts erupted behind me. The owner came running out, waving his arms. I slammed my foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching. In the rearview mirror, I saw him pulling out a phone. He'd be calling the police. I had to get out of town. Now, the road stretched ahead, winding through rolling hills and dense woodlands. I drove fast, my hands gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every passing car felt like a threat. How long before the police set up roadblocks? Before they tracked the stolen truck? I needed to ditch it, but not yet. Not until I was further away. I kept driving north, past villages and fields, always keeping an eye on the rearview mirror. Hours passed. Dusk settled over the landscape. Then, in the distance, I saw something that made my stomach drop, flashing blue lights. A checkpoint. They were already looking for me. I slowed the truck, my mind racing. If I turned around now, it would look suspicious. If I stopped, they'd recognize me. My stolen truck was my downfall. I needed another way out. Then I spotted it, a narrow dirt road branching off to the left, leading into the woods. If I took it, I might avoid the checkpoint, but if they saw me turning, they'd follow. I had no choice. At the last second, I jerked the wheel and veered onto the dirt path. The truck bounced violently as I sped down the uneven road, branches slapping against the windows. Behind me, sirens wailed. They had seen me. I pushed the truck as fast as it could go, but the road was rough, winding through thick trees. I was losing control. Then, up ahead, the path narrowed too tight for the truck to squeeze through. This was the end of the road. I slammed the brakes, threw open the door, and ran. The forest swallowed me once more, the sounds of pursuit growing distant behind me. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing against a fallen tree, my chest heaving. Night had fully fallen now, the darkness my only ally. I had made it out of Leopoldov. I had outrun the guards, the dogs, the police. But I wasn't free yet. As I lay there, staring up at the vast, starless sky, I realized something: this wasn't over. It never would be. As long as I was out here, I was a hunted man. My face was everywhere, my name on every wanted list. There was no going back, no home to return to, no peace. There was only the road ahead, and I would keep running until my legs gave out for good.